From UFOs and the Bermuda Triangle to crop circles, many of us are fascinated by unexplained things. But if there's one mystery that never really goes away, it's Atlantis. This lost ancient city was mentioned by the Greek philosopher Plato in his Socratic dialogues known as Timaeus and Critias. In them, he describes it as a vast, wealthy empire with grand architecture, advanced tech, and a powerful military. This great civilization, according to his dialogues, slowly became greedy and corrupt. The gods became angry, so as a punishment, they sent fire and earthquakes to destroy the city, and in a single night, Atlantis sank into the depths of the sea. So, was it actually real? Well, stay tuned, because today we'll look at all the evidence and theories and see what's real. So, what was Atlantis? Who created it? You've probably heard of Atlantis, even if you don't know the full story. But what was it? And who built it? Well, the Greek philosopher Plato first told this story around 360 BC. In his dialogues, he describes Atlantis as a massive island empire, larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined. It wasn't just big, it was incredibly rich. The land had gold, silver, and rare metals, along with all kinds of unusual wildlife. At the center was a capital city built in perfect circles, rings of land and water connected by wide canals that led straight to the middle. Right there, in the center, stood a grand palace built for Plato, a mortal woman. According to Plato, Atlantis was built by Poseidon, the god of the sea, storms, and earthquakes. He fell in love with Plato and had 10 sons, who were half god, half human. Then, Poseidon divided Atlantis among them and made them the rulers of this powerful empire. The eldest, Atlas, became king, and that's where the name Atlantis comes from. Over time, this empire became a serious power. Its armies pushed across North Africa as far as Egypt and into Europe, reaching Tyrrhenia. For a while, nothing could stop them. That's what Atlantis was supposed to be, not just a city, but a superpower of its time, built by a god and ruled by his bloodline. And it existed 9,000 years before Plato's time. But where was the lost city of Atlantis? According to the legend, Atlantis was an island in the Atlantic. It was situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is what we'd now call the Strait of Gibraltar. That single clue from Plato is where all the searching begins. He doesn't give coordinates, just a direction, past the entrance of the Mediterranean, out into the Atlantic. And that small detail has kept experts arguing for decades. Some think it wasn't that far out. Southern Spain, especially around Cadiz and the nearby Doana marshlands, comes up again and again. It sits right beside the strait, exactly where Plato's gateway would open into the ocean. Over the years, a few sonar surveys in that area have picked up unusual shapes under the water. Nothing confirmed, but enough to make people look twice. Others think it had to be farther out. The Azores are a popular guess for that reason. They sit deep in the Atlantic, almost halfway between Europe and North America. Madeira and the Canary Islands get mentioned too. Real islands, old, and in the same general stretch of ocean Plato pointed toward. Then there are theories that don't follow Plato's story at all. In the 17th century, a Swedish scholar named Olaus Rudbeck argued Atlantis was actually Sweden, using Old Norse texts to support his claim. Around the same time, John Rinaldo Carli tried to link Atlantis to early Italy. Both ideas ignore the Atlantic setting, but they show how far people were willing to stretch the story. In 1882, Ignatius Donnelly pushed the idea that Atlantis was a lost continent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He placed it almost exactly where Plato described, just outside the strait. His book kept that version alive long after scientists started questioning it. Then in the 1970s, Charles Berlitz turned attention to the Bahamas. Near Bimini, underwater rock formations led to claims of streets and walls. Supporters saw ruins. Scientists called them natural formations. Other suggestions point to Santorini in Greece, the Caribbean, and even Antarctica. Different places, same problem. None of them match every detail. That's why the location still isn't settled. Every theory gets one piece right, but never the whole picture. The Eye of the Sahara Desert. While there is no solid evidence of where this legendary city of Atlantis may have been located, one place that keeps coming up in recent discussions is the Eye of the Sahara, also known as the Richat Structure. This formation sits in the Sahara Desert, in modern-day Mauritania, near the western edge of North Africa. From above, it looks strange, almost unnatural. Huge circular rings, one inside another, stretching across roughly 40 kilometers, or about 25 miles. At first, people thought it was the result of a meteor impact. That idea didn't hold up. What scientists now agree on is that it formed from a geological dome that slowly eroded over time, leaving behind those distinct circular ridges. Still, what makes people connected to Atlantis isn't how it formed, it's how it looks. In Critias, Plato describes the capital of Atlantis as a city built in rings, a central island surrounded by water, then land, then water again, repeating in layers. 3 rings of land, separated by channels. When you compare that description to the Richat structure, the resemblance is hard to ignore. If those low areas between the ridges were filled with water, the layout would look almost exactly like what Plato described. That raises the obvious problem. The Eye of the Sahara is nowhere near the ocean. It's deep inside a desert. Supporters of this theory try to deal with that in 2 ways. The first idea is based on time. Around 11,000 years ago, roughly when Atlantis is said to have existed, the Sahara wasn't the dry desert it is today. During what's known as the African humid period, the region had rivers, lakes, and a much greener landscape. Some argue that the area around the Richat structure could have supported a large settlement back then. Another argument focuses on elevation. Some believe that parts of northwest Africa were closer to sea level in the distant past. Over thousands of years, gradual uplift could have raised the land to where it is now. There are even salt deposits found within the Richat structure, which some take as a sign that water was once present there. There are a few other details people like to point out. The land around the structure opens into a wide, flat area, something Plato mentioned when describing a large plain near Atlantis. Ancient references add another layer. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, described a group called the Atlantis living in North Africa, not far from this region. And in Greek tradition, the name Atlas, the first king of Atlantis, also appears in connection with that part of the world. Well, none of this proves anything on its own. But taken together, it's enough to keep the idea in circulation. The location fits in ways that others don't, at least on the surface. And that's why many people say the Eye of the Sahara is the real place where Atlantis existed. The unbelievable theories about Atlantis. Now, there are not one, but tons of theories, and some of them go way beyond anything Plato ever described. Back in 1530, an Italian physician named Girolamo Fracastoro wrote a poem where he casually suggested that survivors of Atlantis ended up in the Americas. According to him, the indigenous peoples there were actually descendants of Atlanteans. There are no maps or evidence, just an idea that somehow stuck around. Then comes 1882, and Ignatius Donnelly takes things to another level. In Atlantis, the antediluvian world, he argued Atlantis wasn't just real, it sat at the center of a huge global network. He stretched its reach across Central America, Mexico, Peru, parts of Africa, Iberia, and even Ireland. His whole argument leaned on the idea that similar cultures around the world had to come from one advanced source. Not everyone agrees with it. In fact, some of his own contemporaries mocked him pretty openly. Around the same time, Helena Blavatsky was writing The Secret Doctrine. Her version didn't just place Atlantis somewhere. It turned its people into something entirely different. She described them as the first true human-like race, much larger than modern humans, with knowledge far beyond their time, including electricity and flight. In the early 20th century, Albert Herman tried to pin Atlantis down in North Africa, specifically in what is now Tunisia. But he didn't stop there. He tied it back to a supposed Germanic origin, claiming it was once linked to Friesland. That line of thinking didn't stay isolated. Figures like Heinrich Himmler later pushed similar ideas, placing Atlantis in the North Atlantic and connecting it to a so-called Aryan or Nordic past. By the 1960s, the story shifts again. Edgar Cayce described Atlantis as a highly advanced civilization somewhere in the Atlantic, often linked to the Caribbean. In his version, it ran on energy drawn from crystals, pushing the whole idea into something closer to science fiction. The name is the same, but the pictures are completely different, depending on who's telling it. The real historical events connection. But the most puzzling theories are not these, but the ones that try to connect Atlantis to real, recorded events. One of them goes all the way back to around 5600 BC, near the Black Sea. At that time, the Black Sea wasn't what it is today. It was a much smaller freshwater lake. Then, something changed. The Mediterranean Sea broke through the Bosporus, and water rushed in, raising the level dramatically. Entire communities along the shore were flooded in what may have been a very short period of time. People living there would have been forced to leave quickly, carrying stories of a sudden, overwhelming flood. Some believe those stories survived for thousands of years and eventually reached Plato, shaping the way he described Atlantis. Another theory focuses on a real civilization, the Minoan civilization. They lived on the island of Crete and nearby Thera, which is now Santorini, and were active roughly between 2500 and 1600 BC. This wasn't a small or isolated culture. They built large palace complexes, developed early writing systems like Linear A, and had strong connections across the Mediterranean. Then, around 1600 BC, the volcanic island of Thera experienced a massive eruption. It released huge amounts of ash, rock, and gas into the atmosphere. The impact didn't stay local. Waves spread across the region, affecting nearby islands and coastal areas. Cities were damaged, trade networks were disrupted, and the civilization weakened. That's why this theory stands out. It doesn't try to invent a place, it points to something that actually existed, at a real time, in a real location, and then asks a simple question. What if that's where the story began? So, was Atlantis actually real? Well, few, if any, scientists think Atlantis existed. But if it didn't exist, then why did Plato tell this story? Is it just fiction? Or something more? Ocean explorer Robert Ballard, the same man who discovered the wreck of the Titanic in 1985, doesn't buy the idea of Atlantis as a real place. He's pointed out that no serious scientific authority has ever confirmed it. Still, he doesn't dismiss the story completely. In his view, the kind of disasters described, massive floods, violent eruptions, have happened many times in history. So the story itself isn't impossible. It just may not be tied to a single lost city. That's where things start to shift. Writer Mark Adams spent years digging into this question while working on his book, Meet Me in Atlantis. He didn't start out believing in it. But after speaking with archaeologists and traveling to different proposed sites, his view changed a bit. Not into full belief, but into something more balanced. According to him, many experts won't even touch the topic. Atlantis has a reputation for ruining careers, so most scholars avoid it altogether. Still, the few who do talk about it tend to agree on one thing: there might be a small piece of truth buried inside the story. Adams suggests that instead of a big continent sinking overnight, there may have been a real coastal or maritime city that inspired the tale. Over time, as stories were passed down, details got exaggerated, stretched, and reshaped. That would explain why Plato insisted more than once that the story was true, even though he was known for using allegories. He also points out something interesting. The story of Atlantis sits between some of Plato's most important works, including the Republic and Timaeus. That placement doesn't feel random. It suggests the story meant something to him, whether as history, symbolism, or something in between. There's even an older layer to it. Plato claimed the story came from Egyptian sources, passed down through generations before reaching him. If that's true, then Atlantis wasn't his invention, it was something he inherited and retold. So the answer isn't clean. Some see it as pure myth, some as a distorted memory of real events. What do you see? Well, drop down your theories below. And with it, that's all from us. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you soon.